Okay, today we're going to have a look at the 2010 Mainstream English exam, taking stock. Again, in the background information, you can find what the issue is about. That helps when opening your introduction. You can also imply the audience, since they would be people attending the International Biodiversity Conference, and no doubt would be sort of leaders in their fields. So over here with the opening image, we have 2010 with some white silhouettes. Now, a couple of things you can pick out of these silhouettes is that there is a variety of flora and fauna. So flora being, the tree life, and fauna being the animal life. One of the main things I would pick out is this white silhouette here between the parent and child, or the adult and child. The way that the child is holding the adult's hand and looking up to them suggests that these adults in the community have a great responsibility to protect the flora and fauna for the future generations. If you want to get right into the image, depending on how much time you have, you could also talk about how they've selected a flamingo here because it's generally regarded to be an animal of beauty. You could have filled this zero spot here with a snake or a big spider, but they chose a flamingo so that we can see flora and fauna as something beautiful that we wish to preserve. Now down here when we look at taking stock, it's actually a pun. It's a pun formed on the idea of stock take. Stock take is, of course, when you reach the end of the financial year and you're about to do your tax time and you spend all night counting all the products on the shelves to see how much you've sold, how much you've still got in stock. And that's for the tax department. But in this case, it's a moment where in this conference they're reflecting on the statistics and the numbers relating to biodiversity to see how well they have done with regards to preserving biodiversity. And just like, the annual stock take, it sort of is implied that this is something that should be done regularly in order to better that performance. Now, the opening sentence is very concise and assertive. This is a year of vital significance to our world. So that at the very, very beginning sets the tone so that the audience is feeling that this is very important, very significant, therefore they should be paying very close attention. But they don't just make that statement alone, they then back it up using the authority of the United Nations, who said it's a celebration of life on Earth and the value of biodiversity in our lives. The world is invited to take action 2010, safeguard, blah, 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 blah. So it's not just the speaker here who is saying that it's an important year. The UN, a well-respected organisation, has declared it as being so. Now, the following questions are in fact open-ended questions, but the fact that he keeps asking the same question over and over again and then adjusting it each time with, where are we? In fact, and then down here he says honestly. Take, for example, if I had a student who was doing maths with me and I said to them, "Are you happy with the answer?" And they said yes. And I said, "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Really?" And they'd be like, "Oh, let me check it again." Okay, so when we ask the same question over and over with these sort of emphatic phrases, putting emphasis on that question and emphasis on this notion of fact and honesty, creates a sense of unsurety and doubt in the audience's mind because they're really asked to seriously reflect on their progress and reconsider the way they respond to that question. There's a few things down here like, with a tinge of sadness. So he starts to shift the tone into something where we're meant to share that emotive appeal of that sense of loss and sadness and regret to position us to embrace the speaker's mood, because that's how we're meant to respond to the statistics that follow on. 35% of mangroves, 40% of forests, blah, 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 blah. So remember, when you talk about statistics, you want to obviously say that they give sort of irrefutable, credible evidence of the degradation of biodiversity. And we're meant to receive these statistics with that tone, with that mood that the speaker has introduced. So we're meant to also feel sad about this loss. By saying it is too late for them, it sets the audience up to infer the difference between them and us, to draw the conclusion that it is not too late for us and we can do something about it, or not even just us, it can also refer to the other animals, creatures, flora and fauna, and it may not be too late for them. So again, we feel like even though we're meant to be sad, there is this little bit of hope. Next, we get a kind of a very apocalyptic feel with words like extinction, destruction, and predators, okay, alien predators. So we get this real end of the world feeling. Now, of course, our inclination is for survival, to avoid the end of the world, and this will create a great sense of fear. So we will want to take preventative action to avoid this apocalyptic outcome. Down here, there's actually a little bit of flattery. We are, in truth, the most educated generation of any to date. Now, flattery normally makes people feel good, but when he follows it with "we have no excuse for inaction," the audience is going to feel a great sense of guilt. Because what is worse, being ignorant and not doing something because you're ignorant, or being intelligent and knowing a lot and not doing something because you choose not to do anything? Obviously, it's the latter. So by flattering them and making them think, oh yes, we're very smart, everything else like that, and then showing that even though they are so smart, they have not taken the correct action, they will of course feel guilty and ashamed, and then want to do something about that. We have a whole lot of adjectives here: wonderful, glossy, inspiring, but there's this great feeling that these adjectives are just superficial aesthetic statements. And they are juxtaposed with this notion of real action. So here, the author hopes to contrast superficial aesthetic actions with real, genuine actions. So this is also followed by some imagery here with mouthing platitudes and the comfort of air-conditioned and sumptuously catered conference halls. Now here, he's actually talking about the audience, because they are in no doubt listening to this speech in an air-conditioned and sumptuously catered conference hall. So it's kind of an indirect attack here, where they realise, okay, we're not just talking about some other people, putting in this fake effort. This is us we're talking about. So they start to feel a little bit probably uncomfortable and start to shift in their seats. And this is compounded when he shifts from inclusive language to exclusive language. It's all very well when we're inclusive and we say, we need to work on this project, this is our responsibility. Some people will be like, oh, okay, well, I don't need to do anything then because somebody else in the group is going to do it. But when we capitalize you and your and we become exclusive, what we're saying here is that this is not up to anybody else, it's up to you. So the individual members of the audience will feel like it's their direct responsibility. It's something that they can't leave up to other people. A lot of the language, particularly the references to the poor in the next couple of paragraphs, is an appeal to social justice. So in the Western world, we have an ingrained sense of, and not just the Western world, I think everywhere, there's a certain ingrained sense of responsibility that we should try and do our best to create equality and look after those who are less well off than us. So by referring to the poor rural communities, and we will be inclined to work on biodiversity to create a greater sense of social justice and equality. There's also a lot of listing in here of negative outcomes: environmental degradation, more rampant illnesses, deepening poverty. So due to the listing, the audience is likely to feel overwhelmed by the amount of negative outcomes here in such a way that they feel that something needs to be done. Notice there is also some metaphors like economic giants. Okay, so here when they said that poverty eradication is crucial to a global action plan, yet the needs of the poor are often subordinated to the interests of us, the powerful economic giants. So using this metaphor that we are giants and we're powerful, again eradicates any excuse for us not helping out the small and the vulnerable, since we're so powerful and big. So in a way, it's a bit of hyperbole. It's also a metaphor. We have some colloquial language down here, a bit of a cliche. We stopped kidding ourselves. So by getting colloquial, by getting frank, he casts aside all the big statistics, the big figures, the social and moral problems, and gets down on a very man-to-man or speaker to audience level, reducing the social distance and speaking sort of in a frank one-on-one way with the audience. We stopped kidding ourselves. So that's sort of saying to them in a very casual and direct way that they understand that they've got to get serious. Bit of repetition in the phrasing down here. Hunt less, gather less, conserve more, preserve more. Even it rhymes a little bit as well. So this helps to place more emphasis on this statement and make it more memorable for the audience. It can almost become sort of a catchphrase or a protest phrase. So again, we have the call to action where he contrasts talk and serious action. So the repetition of that idea of real action and serious action helps to make it very clear what he wants the audience to do about this problem, and that's to take action. Thomas Eisner is a respected biologist, I do believe. So by having his words in a community that have obviously gathered to discuss biodiversity, have the words of somebody who maybe they studied in university or they really respect as a leader in their field, they will be very likely to absorb his message here that they need to protect biodiversity. And here as well, this image is creating the metaphor of having the world in our hands. Okay, so again, we are like the giants, the big powerful giants, and we're able to do something about the problems of the world, and it's our responsibility. Again, I just skipped briefly that notion of what he wants us to do as part of that call to action, which is to contact the people in power, politicians, corporate leaders, everyday householder. So he gives the audience some explicit instructions so they not only understand what this issue is, but what explicitly they should do about it. So he's not just loose in his terms of, we need to take action in general. He lays out a plan so that therefore makes it easier for the audience to leave this conference and know what the next step is.